From the Netherlands, this is the Green Planet Monitor, voices and stories from a warm, wet planet. Today, Extinction Rebellion protests pack London streets.
Public disruption, major disruption, that's what gets the media attention. So there is just a clear message here that the media only liked sensationalism, and we have to play that game. If we want to have the climate and ecological emergency in the media, then that's the game we have to play.
Human beings have commandeered an astonishing quarter of Earth's natural productivity, decimating biodiversity and polluting the planet.
Humans as one species appropriate 20 to 25% of the energy available for all other heterotrophic species. So hemp is often used as an indicator for pressure on biodiversity, the application of pesticides, the application of fertilizers, massive soil management practices, greenhouse gas emissions, groundwater pollution. Human interference into the MPP of ecosystems has a lot of negative ecological side effects.
Bacteria, on the other hand, are the foundation of life on Earth. Most are harmless, even helpful.
They live in the soil, they live in water, they live in our bodies, on our bodies, they live everywhere. Our body is 10% human cells, 90% bacterial cells. So that's a lot of bacteria, and they protect us from pathogens that otherwise might colonize that space.
This is the Green Planet Monitor. I'm David Kattenberg. London's largest ever public protests for climate and earth justice have come to a close. An estimated 100,000 attended the 4-day event over Earth Day weekend, organized by Extinction Rebellion and other UK groups. Unite to Survive was their rallying cry. They want the UK government to set up citizens' assemblies to talk about solutions. I spoke with Marijn van der Heer, External Coordinator for Media and Messaging and Internal Coordinator for Citizens' Assemblies with Extinction Rebellion UK. For those who don't know or have only a vague notion, what is Extinction Rebellion?
Yeah, okay, so let me try and explain that to you in a nutshell. So Extinction Rebellion came about in 2018, and it was formed by a group of people who I already knew from other protests. So they were organising things around air pollution, the expansion of Heathrow, a major airport here in London, and things like that. And then they came together and said, well, actually, these are all issues that are a symptom of a bigger thing, which is the government's inaction on the climate and ecological emergency. And so they said, let's organise one big thing that covers all of this. So Extinction Rebellion came about. A few months after that, that's when I got involved personally. And so it's based on a lot of research and experimentation that's already been done in terms of non-violent direct action, civil disobedience. So it's a climate and ecological emergency activist movement, really, in a nutshell. We have 3 demands. It's for the government to tell the truth about the climate and ecological emergency, which they promised to do at the Rio Earth Summit already way back in 1992, and they've never bothered to do. Then we want net zero carbon emissions by 2025, which in 2018 obviously seemed a lot more realistic than it does now, but we're sticking with it because that is what should have happened according to the science. And then the third demand is a citizens' assembly on climate and ecological justice to decide on how we go about dealing with the climate and ecological emergency. So in a nutshell, that's what Extinction Rebellion is. It started out here in the UK. There's now Extinction Rebellion groups all over the world. And we're a movement. So we're not an organization as such. So we're a bit different in that we're not an NGO. We're a movement of people.
And reading the media news reports about Extinction Rebellion, where Extinction Rebellion's name comes up, we've heard and read about actions that are, some of them, if you'll excuse the pun, off the wall. stories about mashed potatoes and cans of Campbell's soup and things like that. I'm not sure if these were associated with Extinction Rebellion, but what are the tactics that you folks use? And I realize it's as you've described it, it's a freely forming organization. It's pretty non-hierarchical. How have your tactics evolved?
Yeah. So the tactics were based on a lot of research, like the suffragettes, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and the conclusion that was drawn kind of by the founders is that non-violent direct action is absolutely key. So we are non-violent, and that's different than being not violent. Non-violence is really directly mitigating against violence. So it's really, these are all peaceful actions. That doesn't mean they're not disruptive, but in no way are they violent. And mass disruption is really key to our strategy as well. Although, as you may know, we did have a pause on that for a few months to not disrupt the public, because that's the feedback we've been having from the public, is that, yeah, we agree there's an emergency, but we don't like the fact that you're blocking roads and bridges and things like that. But the problem is that public disruption, major disruption, that's what gets the media attention. If you look at the coverage that we've had over the last week for our non-public disruptive protest, it's nothing compared to the attention we get when we disrupt the public. So there is just a clear message here that the media only likes sensationalism, and we have to play that game. If we want to have the climate and ecological emergency in the media, then that's the game we have to play. And I think a lot of people are starting to understand that now. I think the key is that we do also try to target specific pillars of power that are responsible for the climate and ecological emergency. So since January, we've been targeting the justice system, the fossil fuel industry, the finance industry, and the media itself, of course, and then turn back to the government for the big one, which has just taken place. So that is also something that we do, targeted disruption, but disobedience and public disruption will likely remain part of our strategy, although different forms of disobedience will happen now as well. So we've recently had all these lawyers standing up and publicly announcing that they will no longer prosecute climate activists. So that is also a form of disobedience. When we think of disobedience, we think of supergluing ourselves to stuff and causing public nuisance. But there are many, many ways to disobey. And I think there are now plans as well to do a similar thing with journalists, for example, that journalists will refuse to focus on stupid things like what is in our co-founder's shopping basket, or, are we going to disrupt the marathon or not, when we've publicly said in our press statement, in our press conference over and over again, we will not disrupt the public marathon, the London Marathon, and they just wouldn't let it go. And rather than talking about the actual issue at hand, which is the climate and ecological emergency, they are just turning to, frankly, gossip. There is no journalism in this in the UK, hardly at all. So we're hoping that will hopefully be something that, journalists, let's disobey, don't report on nonsense, report on the real news. So it's going to be inventive, it's going to be new, it's going to be creative, and hopefully very, very inclusive. People who had never ever been to a protest before came to the big one. So people are stepping up in their own way. They are, whether it's from sitting on the sofa and doing nothing to coming to Westminster to peacefully protest, that is already stepping up. So that's sort of where our strategy is at the moment.
And I'm sure that in the wake of the catastrophe that was visited upon the UK almost a year ago now, wildfires and all these other dreadful, catastrophic consequences that are here and now, drought, floods, wildfires, these are clearly far more disruptive than not being able to move through traffic because of a huge public protest.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, the media just aren't saying that. They're saying, look at what these pesky rebels, these activists, look at what, activist has become a really dirty word in the UK. It's actually an insult. And it's awful because the disruption we are causing, especially, for example, with our blue lights policy. So we always let ambulances and emergency services through if we are blocking a road or a bridge. We always let them through. If there's a flood or a fire or a bridge has collapsed because of extreme weather, you can't just say, oh, hang on, we'll just pause that crisis and we'll let the ambulances through. What's coming? We're talking about tube stations flooding by 2030. I think the media has such a responsibility to put our actions into context and saying, yes, it is annoying. Yes, they are pesky and a nuisance, but what they are saying is this, and what they're saying is going to affect everybody, and it's just not being put into context. Another example is that Animal Rising recently did this thing at the Grand National, which is this horse race, and in the initial reporting that came out from the media, there was no mention at all of the horses dying in those races. And the only thing the media said was, oh, but that millions of people watch it, and you're disrupting a treasured pastime for millions. There is no mention at all of the death it causes to innocent animals, and it's just so dangerous. This awful reporting that we're seeing here. So yeah, it's tricky because, of course, none of us want to be disrupting the average person, right? We would much rather be doing targeted, peaceful, non-disruptive things. But as we've seen, it just doesn't work. It doesn't get the issue in the headlines. So yeah, we need to carry on this way because we haven't got any time to lose now.
Is radical, non-violent, disruptive climate action, climate and environmental and earth rights action in the UK being criminalized?
Yes, I would say without a doubt is being criminalized. We've just seen 2 individuals who were arrested for a Just Stop Oil action, but they are also Extinction Rebellion members as well, very beloved Extinction Rebellion members, and they are going to prison for 3 years.
For doing what?
They climbed up a very tall bridge, the Queen Elizabeth II bridge, and because they were up there, the road had to be closed by the police to get them down, and so it held traffic up for, I believe, about 12 hours or something like that. So they are saying that disruption they caused is proportionate to sending someone to prison for 3 years, which is a really serious sentence. That is real criminal activity that gets you that sort of sentence. And they are equating this action, which, yes, disrupted people and blocked a major bridge, but it is to sound the alarm, to say there is a massive emergency. Our government is literally doing the opposite of what it should be doing. They are risking the lives of millions of people, and they are just saying that they are happy to do it. So we are here, climbing this bridge, raising the alarm, and that's being criminalized. Absolutely, very harshly criminalized.
Maureen, tell me about how Extinction Rebellion protests have unfolded in London and other UK cities over the course of the past few days. How many people have attended? What's been the age range? We think of Extinction Rebellion as something that young people engage in, but people of all ages engage in it. How have your protests and events and activities unfolded?
Yeah, so we've just come. I mean, I might look a little bit tired. I hope you can't hear it over audio, but we've just come out of 4 days of peaceful, non-disruptive protest around Westminster, which is the seat of power here in the UK, in London. And it's the first time we as XR have ever done anything like this. We went to the police and the councils to ask for permission, which we've never done before. We've always notified them to say, hey, we're going to be doing this, but we've never asked for permission. But we did. And that was a very conscious thing, because we wanted it to be inclusive. We wanted people who do not want to be at risk of arrest or anything like that to feel like they were able to come. We wanted families to come with their children. We wanted elderly people to come and feel safe to be in that space. So we called it the big one because it literally was the big one. It's the biggest joint environmental protests the UK has ever seen. We had well over 100,000 people over those 4 days come to Westminster, with the biggest day definitely being Saturday, which was Earth Day, where we did a massive biodiversity march, where the numbers have varied between 60,000 for sure. We've also heard 90,000 come up as well. So that is huge. And there've been bigger climate protests, but they've never been in this collaborative manner where over 200 different organizations were there in support of it. So it was a real sort of coming together of different movements, different NGOs, different climate and nature organizations, as well as social justice issues. Global Justice Now was there, all these different issues that are all connected in the sense that the government isn't doing enough to tackle any of these issues. And you could see that although the big one was extremely peaceful, it was very joyful, you could see people are angry, people are fed up, people cannot believe the injustice of a government that is implementing. We had this bizarre thing, for those of you not in the UK, like we had this bizarre emergency alert that went off during the protest. It was a trial run for the first time ever, and everybody got it on their phone saying emergency evacuate. And they're doing this weird, they're investing time and money. I mean, the amount of money that must cost, that they are now rolling out this weird thing where you get a warning on your phone. Everybody gets it on the phone to say emergency, but they're not actually dealing with the emergency. We could be acting now to avoid total catastrophe, and instead they're developing this stupid alert to keep us all in our place, to be able to say everybody must go inside now. I'm like talking about, weird mass sort of control over the citizens. It's bizarre.
Listen to my entire conversation with Marijn van der Heer and the Call for Citizens Assemblies at greenplanetmonitor.net. Fossil fuel burning and the resulting pollution of Earth's atmosphere is just one of the insults our planet faces in this human-engineered age of ours, the Anthropocene. In their relentless hunger for food, fiber, and fuel, humans have transformed an estimated 3/4 of the planet's vegetated land surface and 1/4 of its natural productivity. Human appropriation of net primary production, or HANP, this is called. Fridolin Krausman is an authority on HANP. Krausman is a professor of sustainable resource use at the Institute of Social Ecology at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences in Vienna. Krausman and I spoke about HANP and the Anthropocene idea.
Yeah, this is one way of of measuring the size of the socio-metabolic system vis-a-vis the biosphere, if you will, is this indicator of human appropriation of net primary production.
And what do we mean by this?
The idea here is that net primary production, or NPP, that's basically the amount of biotic substances green plants produce from solar energy. And basically this NPP is the energy currency of ecosystems, if you will. Basically, this is the energy that is available for all the heterotrophic food chains in ecosystems.
And so this is the source of all organic matter on the surface of the planet, ultimately.
Exactly. So it's a very important quantity. It's the energy available in ecosystems, basically. Humans now, as a very dominant species, interfere with these processes and appropriate NPP. And they do this by two different types of activities. One is that we change land cover. If we replace forest by a meadow, then usually the NPP on this new ecosystem is lower than in the original forest. So usually we reduce the NPP through land cover change. And then humans extract a fraction of this NPP. They harvest this NPP as wood, cereals, soybeans, for food for humans, food, fiber, fuel, So we harvest NPP, and these processes together, land cover change and harvest of NPP, together this sums up as the human appropriation of NPP. So put in another way, human appropriation of NPP is the difference between the NPP that would be there without land use and the NPP that remains after humans have extracted what they require for their use.
And what are the values of human appropriation of net primary production?
So you mentioned this figure of 40%. This was a very early estimate in the 1980s. And what scholars found out that, of course, this depends a lot on how you define human appropriation of NPP. That you can have differently inclusive definitions of what you consider as appropriated. And this very much defines then if you have values of 20, 30 or 40% of human appropriation of NPP. Currently, the most widely used definition with that you would arrive at the level of NPP appropriation globally of 20 to 25%. And this human appropriation of NPP has been growing over time. It's growing surprisingly not with population growth and GDP, but slower.
Because population growth, I think you've in your 2012 paper, you talk about the period from 1910 to 2005, and population rose by fourfold, and GDP rose 17-fold.
17-fold, and HAMP basically doubled in that period. But still, humans, species.
Why was human appropriation? Why did human appropriation of net primary production not rise at fast of a rate as population and GDP?
Yeah, here we have what we call a problem shift. So initially, when you convert forest to cropland, in traditional agriculture, you have a very low yield. So you have a very high NPP appropriation through the conversion process, and you get out comparatively little. With the industrialization of agriculture, with the Green Revolution, we started to invest a lot of energy into agricultural production by fertilizers, by agrochemicals, by irrigation, by machinery. So we invest a lot of energy, fossil fuel-based energy, to make agroecosystems more productive, to produce more per unit of land. And this intensification of agriculture allows us to extract more biomass from the ecosystems without increasing HAMP. But the problem is shifted then basically from the biotic system to emissions of greenhouse gases, which we buy, so to say, with the investments of fossil energy into agriculture and other side effects. But
so I was going to ask you, to put it in a pedestrian kind of way, what's wrong with human beings appropriating net primary production? if some might say, if we could do it better, if we can exploit all this primary productivity as potential, why isn't that good? What are the negative consequences of appropriating natural net primary productivity?
Yeah, I would say there are probably several answers to that. One is that humans as one species appropriate 20 to 25% of the energy available for all other heterotrophic species. Of course, this is and it's also used that it's an indication also for pressure on biodiversity, yeah, because we appropriate an overproportionally high share of the energy available in ecosystem and in heterotrophic food chains, and that has an impact on biodiversity. So hump is often used as an indicator for pressure on biodiversity. The higher hump, the higher the pressure that humans have on biodiversity.
And natural forests, natural grasslands are habitat for a wide range of species, whereas
cultivated lands,
tree plantations and wheat fields are not.
Exactly. So this is, I think, one important aspect, and then this intensification process that allows us to decouple biomass harvest from hump brings about a lot of other negative side effects in land use systems. Yeah, the application of pesticides, the application of fertilizers, massive soil management practices. All of this, of course, has side effects. Is related to greenhouse gas emissions. Is related to groundwater pollution. Is related to biodiversity loss. So human interference into the MPP of ecosystems has a lot of negative ecological side effects. And currently, with a level of appropriation of 20 to 25%, it's assumed that actually to be sustainable, this has to be reduced. It's hard to say to what level exactly. Yeah, we are not yet at a point where we can quantify this planetary boundary precisely. But basically, we see that with this level of MPP appropriation, our land use systems are not sustainable because we cause a lot of biodiversity loss, soil erosion, greenhouse gas emissions with this type of land use systems.
Are there ways to appropriate net primary production to produce food, fiber, and fuel on the land more intensively, but more sustainably?
Well, this is not...
It's the ultimate dream in agriculture, becoming more and more intensive and efficient, and presumably less polluting.
I think...
Like doing this at a lower metabolic rate, if I can connect those two concepts.
I think that on the one hand, you can't give a global answer for that, yeah, because I think there's a huge difference between land use systems in industrialized global north that are very intensive, very high tech, and land use systems in the global south that work differently, yeah, both in terms of the management practices involved, the inputs involved, but also in terms of the climates involved. But I think for the global north, I think the challenge here is to, on the one hand, extensify land use systems to make them more sustainable.
What do you mean extensify?
Using less industrial inputs into land use systems, basically. Yeah. Reducing the input of fertilizer, of agrochemicals, going towards a direction of organic farming, which is has a lot of beneficial effects on soil quality, on biodiversity, reduces soil degradation, but has the problem of having lower yields. So I think the big challenge here is to, on the one hand, make agriculture more eco-friendly or ecological, without requiring to expand the land we need to produce our agricultural products. So I think it has to be a combination, yeah, on the one hand of what's often called demand side measures. So on the one hand, we consume too many calories today. Yeah. We have a lot of high losses, food losses. We consume a large share of animal products which are very inefficient. So I think a combination of reducing food losses and dietary change towards diets with a lower share of animal protein, and on the other hand, an agriculture which is less intensive can provide for healthy diets and sustainable diets without an expansion of the area that we need to produce the food. So it's this combination, and this would allow us to feed population without increasing hump, basically.
Is discussion about the Anthropocene, this emerging debate and process leading, I suppose, ultimately to the designation of a new epoch, the Anthropocene, and trying to pinpoint, the golden spike. Where is it best exemplified? When did it begin? Is this having an impact? Is this fertilizing discussions and creative thinking within the social ecology? It's not a movement, but within the social ecology disciplines.
Yeah, I think that the Anthropocene debate is a very productive debate, actually. On the one hand, I think the important thing is that it makes visible that humanity has become a geological force in changing the planet. Yeah, and this is a new quality of human interference with the global biosphere, because we really have developed, based on our metabolic transitions, the possibility to change the biosphere. So I think this is the one thing that's important, and the other thing is that it has triggered a lot of discussions on what are the factors behind that. When did this process start? And there are different theories. There's the Ruddiman hypothesis, which argues that actually the Anthropocene should start 7,000 years ago, when humans started to deforest the earth. We have argued that actually the key component here is the use of fossil energy carriers, which started 300 years ago. And then there is the people who argue for the Great Acceleration, another pattern that we see that emerges in the 1940s and 50s. And to me, it's not so important when exactly what we exactly define here as the Anthropocene, but I think this discussion is extremely helpful, because it's a discussion that engages, on the one hand, of course, geologists, because they're concerned with the methods how to measure the spike that they need for their tools, but it concerns social ecologists who are interested in society's metabolism. It concerns anthropologists. It concerns economists. There is a debate about the Capitalocene, so the role of the evolution of global capitalism as a driving force. And all of this has been triggered by this idea of Paul Crutzen that we're actually facing a new epoch, the Anthropocene. So whatever comes out of this process, how we define it, this debate is there. And I think that's the most important aspect of this idea of the Anthropocene, in my view.
How do we change human societal metabolism? How do we go about doing this at the societal level? It would seem to me that governments are just really poorly equipped and probably, not terribly interested in analyzing the situation in terms of the net metabolism of society, net consumption and processing of appropriation of energy and matter, and trying to design new systems that operate at lower metabolic rates. I mean, how does one go about trying to bring human societal metabolism and economic metabolism into step with the natural metabolism of the planet?
That's the big question, of course, and I can't give you kind of the guideline how to do that, really. But I think currently the mainstream is that we have to continue to grow economically, because economic growth is seen as the most important indicator of progress and of improvement of well-being, and that we need technological development to decouple economic growth from resource use and from energy use. So the basic idea is that we can, based on green technologies, based on efficiency, we will be able to continue growing economically while reducing our metabolism.
But some would challenge that. Some would say,
Yeah.
have for many years, permanent growth is it's impossible. We call that cancer.
Yeah. So this is what I said, basically currently the mainstream or the hope of many people. But on the other hand, there's a lot of evidence that this rate of efficiency gain that we would need for that cannot be achieved. Yeah. So without doubt, green technologies, efficiency gains, decoupling, we have to work to make progress here. But for many scholars, and including myself, I think that this will not be sufficient to really reduce the size of our metabolism globally. And that we basically need more far-reaching changes here. Yeah? And this concerns, on the one hand, the question how we define a good life, quality of life. And on the other hand, this will, of course, concern the structure of our economy, because our current economic system obviously requires growth to function. Yeah. So if we agree that we have to move away from this growth paradigm, then this has massive implications, of course, also on the structure of the economy. But the evidence here, on the one hand, I think, is that what we see is that basically at low income, small amounts of material energy that we use additionally really have a beneficial effect on quality of life and well-being. But very soon, when economies get richer, increasing amounts of energy, of material use, don't result in better quality of life, but rather into lifestyle changes. Yeah. So what we actually do see is that there is a lot of research about that done, that we can meet human needs, and we can provide a lot of the services that we need for a good life with a much lower level of energy and resource use. So that's basically possible, but in my view, this will require also changes in our material wealth, the things that we just discussed before. To make agriculture sustainable, it also requires to reduce the consumption of animal-based products to a certain extent. It doesn't mean that we all have to turn vegan, but we probably have to reduce the consumption of animal-based protein, for instance. Yeah.
Have national metabolic rates been ranked or assessed and compared with each other around the world?
Yeah. Yes, of course, we see very clearly that in high-income countries we have the highest metabolic rates. Of course, also there we have differences. We have countries like Japan, the UK, the Netherlands with comparably lower metabolic rates, and we have countries like the United States or many of the oil exporting countries with very high metabolic rates. We also have China now with very high metabolic rates, mainly related to this massive buildup of infrastructure and buildings in China in the last 20 years. Yeah, there are large differences here.
Societies have an ecology, don't they?
Yeah,
I mean, one can examine societies, human society, ecologically. We think of ecology as stuff that's green and wet. But human societies have an ecology, don't they? And that must be in step ultimately with the ecology of the planet, the natural ecology.
Yeah, exactly. This is this idea that the biology of societies, their metabolism has to be consistent with the source and sink capacities of the planet, right? The basic challenge of sustainable development is to organize, to manage the metabolism that societies inevitably have, in a way that this consistency is maintained, and that we don't transgress these source and sink capacities of the global biosphere. And we have to do that for a population which will reach 10 billion in a few decades. Yeah.
10 billion.
Well, that's the scenarios of the United Nations that there will be a peak between 9 or 10 billion people.
It's scary.
Yeah, that is scary.
Fridolin Krausman is professor of sustainable resource use at the Institute of Social Ecology at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences in Vienna. His research focuses on the metabolism of societies and their economies and ways of bringing socioeconomic metabolism into line with Earth's natural source and sink capacities. Krausman has also pioneered the notion of human appropriation of net primary production, or HANP. Read more about this at greenplanetmonitor.net. You are listening to the Green Planet Monitor. I'm David Kattenberg. Bacteria are Earth's most ancient creatures. Their numbers and total mass are colossal. By some estimates, the combined mass of all bacteria on Earth is 1,000 times greater than all humans. Those microbes make planet Earth go round. The vast majority of them are perfectly harmless and actually essential for life on this planet. Marianne Smulders studies environmental bacteria at Radboud University in the Netherlands. What do we mean by ecological microbiology?
It means that we are not studying pathogens, but that we are studying microorganisms that you can encounter anywhere in the environment. So they live in the soil, they live in water, they live in our bodies, on our bodies, they live everywhere.
And you were just telling me that you were reading about the number of microorganisms on the skin.
Yeah. So our body is 10% human cells, 90% bacterial cells. And on the skin, we have about 1 million bacteria per square centimeter. So that's a lot of bacteria. And they protect us from pathogens that otherwise might colonize that space.
And they're even more abundant in our gut.
Yeah, I think there's about 1 kilo of our body weight is estimated to be, it's a rough estimate. And it varies for different people, of course, but depending on your own weight. But about 1 kilo of body weight consists of bacteria, which is a lot of bacteria because they're very small.
And it's amazing that, for every one of our own cells, there are 10 bacterial cells, which kind of raises a philosophical question.
Yeah,
right?
Who are we?
Who are we?
Yeah.
The bacteria are prokaryotes, we are eukaryotes, but there's more prokaryotic cells on us and in us than there are eukaryotic cells of our own. So it's funny, we're still eukaryotic organisms, but there's more of the prokaryotes than there are of us.
Yeah, to me that really brings the message across that we are connected. We're interconnected with our environment, with other species, and with our ecosystems. So humans do not stand alone and are there to dominate and use and pollute, but we are parts of Earth. So that's to me the message is we need to take care of our Earth better to be able to take care of our own health as well. So.
Is it your sense that people are afraid of bacteria, that there's a phobia? There are phobias out there about bacteria?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, my own daughter, after the COVID, focus on washing hands, disinfecting surfaces. She's gone a bit over the top with washing her hands and being worried about it. I think people are worried. And you've got to be sensible. We have on our skin 1 million bacteria per square centimeter, and they keep pathogens from colonizing that space. But you can get pathogens on your hands, so washing hands is a good idea, but don't get too silly about it, and don't use those soaps that have antibiotics in, because then you also kill the beneficial bacteria on your skin, and you don't want that. You just don't want to wash off the bacteria, the transient microflora, that's what we call it, that you pick up from maybe touching things or touching your other people, touching your pets or pet dogs, and you wash them off with soap. and then you should be fine.
What's the difference between a bacterium that's pathogenic and an environmental bacterium that's out in the environment that's not pathogenic? Like, why do some bacteria make us sick and others don't?
Yeah, that's a good question. Bacteria that make us sick have an ability to penetrate our defenses. So one, they grow at 37 degrees, they like that. And also they can enter our cells, so they can adhere to our cells, to our surfaces, get into between the mucosal cells, and non-pathogenic bacteria cannot do that. They often grow at lower temperatures as well.
Okay. So in the environment, what sorts of environments do you study?
Yeah, so we study here at the department, we study microorganisms that are important in the carbon cycle, in the sulfur cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and the ion cycle. And these bacteria can be found in marine systems, in freshwater aquatic ecosystems, but also in, for example, peat bogs, where a lot of methane is produced, which is very important for the carbon cycle, of course, and global warming. They're in the soil, and my own bacteria, where I work with, are bacteria that were isolated from aquatic ecosystems, and they're now being used in wastewater treatments.
So these are useful bacteria?
Extremely useful, yeah. So wastewater treatment is done by bacteria, yeah? So often it starts with just taking an environmental sample and using that as an inoculum, or you get a sample from another wastewater treatment plant to start up a new one, but they consist of bacteria that are able to remove nitrogen from the water, so remove ammonium and urea from urine, and also remove carbohydrates by eating it up. And then at the end, the bacteria will release nitrogen gas and CO2, and that's the end product. So they are extremely important in wastewater treatment.
I first encountered your name in an article that was talking about bacteria on money, on banknotes. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a bit about that? Did you actually study monitor for the presence of bacteria on banknotes?
We didn't study it in the lab, but it was a question from my university newspaper. They wanted to know how clean money was. So money can be dirty in many ways, of course. But this time they wanted to look at what the bacterial population on banknotes was. So we tested this in an undergraduate practical course as well. So we put some banknotes on large agar dishes with nutrient medium in, and we pressed the banknotes on, and then took it off, and then incubated the plates, and then we saw how many different colonies, and each colony is grown from one bacterial cell. We could see on those plates, and we saw quite a lot of colonies, and we did some microscopy on them, but it's not something that I personally am very worried about. So yes, there are bacteria on there, but as I said, most bacteria are non-pathogenic. They are beneficial, so they could just be environmental bacteria. They could also be bacteria that come from our skin, and they can be pathogenic, but it's so rare that you get ill from those. So,
And did you identify what species of bacteria were present on the banknotes, or did you just kind of look at the colonies, big and small, and different colors? And
that's right. That's what we did. And some of them were bright yellow, and they could be Staphylococcus aureus, or they're actually a bit more golden. And Micrococcus luteus, those are the bright yellow ones. We could see some of those colors, but we didn't do a DNA analysis on them, so no, I didn't identify those species. But skin bacteria often are Staphylococci. They live on the moist areas on the skin, and in children often Streptococci. And there's also Propionibacterium, which is a skin bacterium that you can often find on these surfaces, I would think. Not sure how long they survive on there.
And you think about coins. How about coins?
Yeah, we did try coins as well. Also there, we could see colonies. Yeah,
and
not too many.
You think about coins. They're in your pocket along with your handkerchief.
Yep, that's
you put
right.
your hand in and you sneeze and cough and touching coins. And it's not something that people normally put in their mouth. You wouldn't want to, but you'd imagine they must be incredibly contaminated.
Yeah, so we did see colonies. From samples we took from coins as well. But again, yeah, people do not often get sick from these things. So most bacteria on those coins are probably non-harmful. And if they are, it's only 1 or 2. That's not going to make you really sick.
What do you tell people or students in your microbiology classes about what they should be doing around their home, their living environment, their floors, their kitchen surfaces, their bathroom? Do you talk much about how concerned or careful people should be at home about bacteria that are present in the environment?
To be honest, I don't tell students that, no. And because I know that most bacteria are not harmful and actually beneficial, I don't think I'm a very good cleaner. I'm not too worried about it.
I used to ask my students, where do you think is the most contaminated place in your home? And of course, inevitably, people say, "Oh, the bathroom, the toilet seat."
Yeah, that's not the case. It's not the bathroom or the toilet; it's the dishcloth, and because that's wet, it's warm. It's been in contact with food remains, so it's a perfect habitat for bacteria to grow. So that I would change regularly. And also the surfaces of your kitchen, if you wipe them, then dry them, then bacteria can't grow very long. If you keep it wet, then that's a better environment for bacteria to grow. So if you keep it dry and clean, then it's okay. And the dishcloth can go in the washing machine every few days at max.
and thoughts on household cleansers? I mean, those germphobic types go crazy with all kinds of cleansers with antimicrobial compounds in them. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would never use those, because if you use cleaners with antibiotics in, then...
or antimicrobial compounds like triclosan.
Yeah, that is kind of an antibiotic, isn't it? So I would never use it, because soap kills most bacteria fairly efficiently, and you don't really want to start using antimicrobials that can also create resistance in a bacterial population. So if we all start using this and we don't use it properly, then not all bacteria die, and then those that survive are maybe the resistant ones, and they start growing again, and then we might actually create a problem with pathogenic bacteria that are resistant to these compounds. So I would really leave those compounds for in hospital settings where it is important that everything is being killed, but not in the household, no. Just, normal cleansing material without antimicrobials is perfectly fine.
Marjan Smolders is a microbiologist at Radboud University in the Netherlands. She studies bacterial adaptations to their environment and how bacteria can help remediate human pollution. Marjan is also a climate activist with Scientists for Future Netherlands and Scientist Rebellion Netherlands. Read more about her research on friendly bacteria at greenplanetmonitor.net. That's it for today's GPM, coming to you from Earth Chronicle Productions, Breda in the Netherlands. Listen, read, and watch more Earth stories at greenplanetmonitor.net. And please support independent Earth journalism. You can subscribe to the GPM or make a contribution at greenplanetmonitor.net. I'm David Kattenberg. Over and out for now.